Hi, I'm Deboki and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I'm going to be reviewing the first two books in the Thornchapel series by Sierra Simone. The Thornchapel series is an erotica series. It's based around a group of friends who met each other as children at this mysterious estate in England called Thornchapel because their parents were, for some secret reason, all congregated there. Now, as adults, they've all reunited at Thornchapel and they've decided to start digging into its various secrets and mysteries, through like traditional means like reading books and going through archives and everything. And because this is erotica, they also use less conventional means like pagan rituals that involve everyone fucking each other. There are 4 books in total in this series. Today I'm going to be reviewing the first 2 that have come out already. These are A Lesson in Thorns and A Feast of Sparks. The next 2 books, Harvest of Sighs and Door of Bruises, are, according to Sierra Simone's website, planned for a release next year in 2020. In A Lesson in Thorns, we basically meet this cast of friends through the perspective of Prosperina, or Poe. She was one of them. She met them as a child, but then moved back home, and now she's come back as an adult, as a librarian who has been hired to catalog all the various materials in this old mysterious estate. When she returns to the estate, she's drawn in particular to 2 brooding dudes amongst this group of friends. The first is Auden, who owns the estate, so he's like, rich English manor lord kind of figure. And then the other guy is Saint, who is apparently in this ongoing conflict with Auden that she does not know the source of, and in fact, nobody really is quite clear on. This is erotica, so I don't think this is particularly spoilery to say, but the ongoing geometry there is less about a love triangle and more about the ways that you can arrange multiple people into various positions. And this continues in A Feast of Sparks, but with more focus on the tension between Auden and Saint, so you get more of their points of view as they're coming to terms with their feelings for each other as well as Poe. While the plot, as I've described it, probably sounds like it just revolves around these 3 characters, and I think these first 2 books are primarily focused on the tension between them, there are other characters who I want to highlight because they do still play a significant role in the plot, and I think will probably play more of a role in the future books, I hope. And when I say plot, I also mean in the smut of this book. So there's an Instagram influencer who's maintaining this very curated presence online while dealing with kind of darker truths from her own past. There's also an ambitious architect who's dealing with the pressures of being a Black woman in her industry, as well as a priest. So if you've read Sierra Simone's other books, you are probably aware of the importance of priests to her work as a bit of a motif, or at the very least, I found her through her priest series, so that is like what I most strongly associate her with. And what I like about some of her books, like what I think makes them really like fun, angsty, like really like kind of draw you in sort of books, is that a lot of times the characters that she's writing are dealing with taboos that are really put upon them based on structures they've walked themselves into. So in the case of Priest, for example, it's a strict religious structure that, the main character, the priest, has chosen for specific reasons in his personal life, but like he now is dealing like with whether or not he really wants that actually. So for me, her books are at their strongest as erotica novels when that smut that is, a part of the genre matches with like the actual emotional weight of the character's internal questions. There is, however, a very delicate balance to that kind of writing, and I'll get into that a little bit later because when her books tip too much to one side at the expense of the other, that's when I find them weaker overall. But before we get into that, let's start with what I like about the Thornchapel series in particular. Sierra Simone really knows how to set a mood. The whole Thornchapel setting has this dark, mysterious English manor thing going on that just works. I mean, not just like dark English manor. I mean like dark, mysterious English manor, but make it sexy, because I'm gonna guess that most of them are not actually that sexy. But in the world of this book, it feels like a very sexy manner. And so it just feels like the perfect book for like reading curled up in a couch with like a bajillion candles around you. Like it's dark out, but you've got candles on. It's a little bit unsafe, a little bit cozy. And the mood of the setting is matched by the complicated relationships between all of the characters. I've been watching Love Island recently, and there's like kind of a Love Island vibe to this book. If you're not familiar with Love Island, it is this very delightful, trashy reality TV show about a bunch of strangers with a broad range of accents coupling up in an island paradise. And sometimes even just like fucking each other in the same room while everyone else is just like also chilling in that room. And like this book feels like that because that is a thing, because all of these friends are just like coupling up with each other. And sometimes even, yeah, fucking each other while other people are just casually having a conversation. First off, like someone should make the reality TV version of this, like instead of Love Island, it's like Love Pagan Manor or something. But also, it's just that there's this really seedy underbelly to this story that it fully indulges in. This book has BDSM, exhibitionism, voyeurism, pretty much like every permutation of these friends boning each other. So if you like your smut, not just like smutty, but full on dirty, then this is that book. But moreover, there's just so much tension in this book. Like you can feel that feeling of waiting for something to just snap. Because like when Simone decides to go in on a character's doubts about it themselves, she really goes in. And so you're just like really drawn into how each character's internal doubts and struggles or whatever about themselves plays out, not just for them, but like against everybody else's. Like how all of those crises are kind of like bumping up into each other, both like emotionally, but like because this is erotica, physically. This is my way of showing boning when like there's every kind of boning. Like I don't know why. This makes sense in my head. Also, I want to reiterate something that I said in my Petty Grievances video. I love the cover for A Lesson in Thorns. I think it's one of the most striking covers I've seen recently. Whoever designed it, like, kudos to you, because I just really love this cover. Like, I feel like I saw it on Instagram a ton, and I just, like, every time you see it, like, you're immediately drawn to it. And, like, yes, it's partly because, like, the way that the shirt goes, you're just like, wow, boobs. But, like, I think it's a very well done version. I think part of the reason why I love this cover so much is because I think it's both like, it manages to capture both like the smuttiness of this series, like, yeah, there's titties on the cover, very much in your face, but like in a style that feels also very appropriate for like a mysterious English manor. In terms of what I found frustrating about this series, this goes back to kind of those previous issues that I hinted at with some of Simone's books that, at least for me, exist, is that for me, her writing is weakest when she substitutes sex for character development and for conversation. And obviously, this is erotica. Like, there's a certain extent where you have to walk into the book kind of expecting a certain level of sex position. But it's tough because I feel like her books sometimes are so good at that balance between sex and like actually developing the character beyond just being about sex. And in particular, when you're developing relationships between characters, there are times in your life where you have to use words and not just use your genitalia to communicate. And this has come up for me in previous books of hers. In particular, I remember it was really frustrating for me in the sequel to Priest, where there are conflicts between the characters that are based on them like not telling each other very important things. And it's the kind of thing where like, sure, this is an erotica series. Like, I know that the sex is a big part of it, and I'm cool with that. Like, I love reading smut, but in terms of like building an actual relationship between characters, there has to be something more than sex. And if your conflict is going to be based like on a lack of communication, like that is a core tenet of a relationship. And if the reason they're not having this communication is because they're too busy fucking their way through their angst, then like I'm not convinced that there's a solid relationship. And these books, it's not quite the same thing in terms of like building a solid basis of a relationship, because I don't think these characters are necessarily at that point yet. Maybe they are. Maybe I'm supposed to buy a deep abiding love between them. But there is an element of the smut coming at the expense of other aspects of the book. For me, it's probably most obvious in the characterization of Poe, in part because of the frequency of her point of view. She's the main point of view character in the first book, and her point of view is frequently used in the second book. And I loved Poe most when the book focused on her competence as a librarian. But when it comes to the erotica of the story, Poe doesn't just get horny, she becomes like insipid. It didn't really bother me too much until the end of the first book, where her transformation from like horny competent librarian to like mewling sex kitten like became complete and very obvious. But it was incredibly frustrating in the second book, because like this is the point at which she becomes the least interesting character in this series. Like the main tension is between Saint and Auden, and so I was fully drawn into wanting to learn more about the conflict between them, and then her point of view would come in and I would just be like, I can't deal with her anymore. And beyond the way that I found that writing frustrating in terms of how it took away from the characters, I also found it frustrating in terms of what it took away from the plot. With Sierra Simone's previous book, Priest, at least for the first book, that's mostly a book about two characters falling in love. So like this exposition for me was like not really that much of a problem. I understand its role in the plot a lot more. I feel like it gels more with how the story is actually building up. And, you know, I understand the parameters of what I'm dealing with when I'm not only just reading like romance, but reading erotica. But the Thornchapel series is a series that clearly wants to have a plot. There is mystery, there is intrigue, and while I really like the way that those things are integrated into the setting, I don't find any of the plot particularly mysterious or intriguing. Poe's mother disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Everyone's parents have clearly been up to something, also clearly something smutty, but like it's weird because now we're talking about everyone's parents having sex, and that's just like always awkward, and that kind of also kills some of the vibe in this book. But beyond that, I don't get what the stakes are. I don't even get 2 books in what answers we're really trying to get to. Instead, both the first and second book end on cliffhangers designed to keep you interested as a reader, but personally I hate books that have to do that. I think that's usually a sign that the actual core of the story is not being paced out correctly. I'll tolerate a cliffhanger if there's something else in the book that I'm like really able to hold on to that I really like, but in cases like this, I find them very frustrating. I will probably end up finishing the Thornchapel series. I'm probably gonna wait for all of the books to be out so I don't have to deal with the frustration of cliffhangers and can just finish the series. I think it's gonna be sort of like a, well, I might as well kind of situation where, you know, I can just finish it and see like how the series ends. I'm still intrigued enough with some of the characters, some of these side characters who I think are more compelling than some of the primary plot of the stories. And also I know that Sierra Simone writes some good smut, so I will read it in some ways just for the smut. It's not going to be a hate read, it's more going to be like a frustrated read because I feel like there's so much potential in this series. So I'll only really want to get back into it when I know that there's an ending involved.